Surviving the Game as a Barbarian, Chapter 751, 1.1/5. We lost track of Baron Yandel. The servant who had served him for decades lowered his head in shame as he delivered the report. However, the Marquis did not become angry. He simply closed his eyes and let out a long sigh, as if trying to contain his emotions. I understand. While he couldn't say he wasn't angry at the plan's failure, he needed to be precise in directing his anger. For the Marquis, the target of his fury was himself and, moreover, the world itself. A world that seemed to manipulate events with invisible strings, as if it found pleasure in doing so more than any one person could. The world doesn't want him to die. Thunder was fired. Even though he didn't know what Yandel had done, that barbarian blocked the attack, protected everyone, and ended up being out of combat. From the reports received, it seemed that Yandel was on the verge of death. Therefore, he believed that one more thunder shot would end the matter. "Tell me, what happened?" demanded the Marquis. "It's just that. An unknown magic circle had been activated, and when the dust settled, everyone had disappeared from sight. We are gathering information about what magic was used as quickly as possible." "There's no need for that. I already know what it is. Forgiveness." As Prime Minister of Rafdania, the Marquis knew this city better than anyone else. This city was an immense fortress. The largest in existence, capable of responding and reacting to any situation even under invasion by external forces. There were countless ancient magics spread throughout the fortress, and some of them could still be used to this day. It must be some kind of summoning magic circle. One that forcibly pulls everything in a defined area to another place. Although the Marquis was hearing about the situation on the ground only through second-hand reports, he could piece together the events better than anyone. Which means that the culprit would be the 5th Commander, Baron Wilkins. If it was him, he would have been given the authority to use ancient magics in District 7 as soon as the war measures were instituted. The Marquis organized the information as if he were talking to himself. He wouldn't have been able to prepare for the first impact of thunder, but he would have been on alert from then on. Because he would have realized that our target was Baron Yandel, he would have done everything he could to block the second attack. However, it must have taken him a long time to activate the magic circle. The Marquis began to drum his fingers on the table. "You said some were left behind." "Yes. About a dozen barbarians on the outskirts of the group did not disappear." "I see, so the magic circle was activated in a hurry when they realized our forces had retreated." The fire returned to the Marquis's eyes. "In that case, it's not too late yet." Forgiveness. This magic circle was last used for rescue purposes during the Iron Wall Rebellion. However, records indicate that it could not be used properly, as it was also activated in a hurry on that occasion. There was no chance the records could be wrong. While devising this plan, he had reviewed every trick available in the palace arsenal hundreds, no, thousands of times. Over and over again. Talk, talk, talk. A quick knock was heard at the door. When the Marquis allowed entry, a man hurried in and bowed. Eltora Tersarian, the former 3rd Commander and son of the Marquis. However, even though he was his direct blood, the Marquis only asked what the reason for his visit was. What it was. His tone was even, colder than the one he used with the servant. If one looked closely, one would notice that he was frowning slightly, as if he was displeased with something, but the expression quickly disappeared. "The Divine Spear, Einar, has been spotted causing pandemonium in District 4's Dimensional Plaza." The Marquis's lips curved into a smile at his son's report. If the summoning magic circle had worked perfectly, all the people within the designated area would have been transported to the imperial capital. However, this was confirmation that it had not happened. Even during the Iron Wall Rebellion, there were problems because people who were supposed to be rescued were randomly thrown into different districts. Of course, still, if Bjorn Yandel was lucky enough to be transported to the territories of Rafdania's forces, there would be nothing to be done. It's still too early to give up. That barbarian was just like him. If it wasn't impossible, that monster would seize any possibility, no matter how small, to obtain victory in the end. To capture such a monster, there was only one thing to be done. Eltora, send this message to all forces. Tell them to inspect every locker and box in the districts currently under our control. He would become the same monster. Have you ever felt like fate was playing a game with you? If someone asked Rodmiller that question, he could nod and describe several occasions when he felt that premise applied. When he lost his parents in childhood. When he met the benefactor who taught him the skills needed to survive. When he discovered that he constantly had to meet new people in the maze because he wasn't skilled enough to navigate it on his own. Despite this, he managed to participate in the first chapter of the story of a man who would be remembered as a great hero. Growing up in the Reedless Church orphanage, Rodmiller believed that everything was determined by fate. Meeting people, learning new things, making allies, gaining things I considered precious, realizing new truths, giving up some things to obtain more important ones, and feeling emotions I had never experienced before. If chance were destiny, then his entire life was just a continuous repetition of chance encounters. Maybe even now. How irritating. Rodmiller felt the uncomfortable hand of fate again. Could anyone blame him? An ancient magical weapon fell from the sky. The man who seemed impossible to defeat protected everyone and collapsed. With no time to regroup, enemies appeared from all directions, forcing him to flee with the others. Wow! The barbarian with the spear carried the dying hero, while the elf, hired by the elemental regent, led the way. The dual-armed Therian jumped from side to side, protecting whoever was in danger, and the mage, who had taken the lead of the group, quickly cast spells to find an escape route. The enemies are retreating. The enemies, who seemed stuck together like tar, suddenly moved away like the receding tide. It's thunder. When the attack appeared in the sky again, geometric shapes appeared on the ground where they were, shining with intense light. His memory after that became confused. When he regained consciousness, he was in front of a statue of the goddess. Teleportation. Looking around, he noticed that the temple was reduced to rubble, and no Ark soldiers were walking the streets beyond the windows. And Bjorn Yandel, the man everyone called a hero, was lying in front of him, unconscious. Thanks to the countless higher-level potions that had been poured on him, there didn't seem to be any visible external injuries. He was just covered in blood. Soon, he would wake up. Holding on to this hope, Rodmiller waited silently, but the situation quickly worsened. It wasn't Yandel's condition that suddenly worsened. Search everything. The Marquis has ordered you to check every corner of this place, even if you have to tear off the wallpapers. The soldiers, who were sometimes seen through the windows as patrols, began to search the area with a clear objective. Soon they would be discovered. Yandel, can you hear me? Rodmiller hurriedly woke Yandel, and fortunately, the barbarian awoke from his deep sleep. Don't worry, I won't have any trouble moving. For some reason, he started to spurt blood from every pore and collapsed again. Rodmiller's mind went blank at the scene. The enemy would find them soon. They needed to get out of here before that happened. But how? He didn't know. So Rodmiller began searching the interior of the ruined temple, looking for information. Currently, they were in the central branch of District 4 of the Reedless Church. They could reach the imperial capital if they followed the main road in front of the temple. And if they could get there, we will survive. But there was one big problem. How would they get there? How would he transport this gigantic, immobile barbarian through the enemies to their destination? Fortunately, Rodmiller was used to fighting reality. Instead of looking for a perfect plan, he made the best choice possible. I need a horse and cart. Rodmiller went to the stable attached to the temple. There was a wagon for transporting goods there, but no horses. It seemed that all the horses had already been taken. Relincho. However, miraculously, his eyes met those of a horse wandering outside the fences. It didn't matter how that horse was still there. It had probably jumped over the broken fences and luckily escaped being looted along with the others. The important thing was that he now had a horse and cart. Calm down, calm down. Slow down there. Since Rottmiller had experience handling horses from his days at the orphanage, he held the horse's reins. He then tied the animal to the cart so that he could pull it. He managed to move the colossally heavy barbarian into the wagon, bending his body so that his feet wouldn't stick out and filling the gaps with piles of hay. Finally, he placed a large tarpaulin over the whole thing, turning it into something that looked like nothing more than an ordinary transport vehicle. The problem was, he didn't know if this would work. Could he make it to his destination without any problems? If he failed, they would both die. Maybe the right choice was to fight for his own survival alone. These thoughts tormented him, making him feel increasingly frustrated. Why did it have to be him? This man had countless allies who were more talented and capable than he was. Even if Yandel never asked for help, many people in the city would do anything to help him. So why, at the time when he needed help the most? Why did it have to be me next to him? I'm going crazy. Words of frustration escaped his mouth. He shook Yandel's body, hoping he would wake up, and just stared blankly when he didn't. He cursed fate for putting him in this situation, and then felt ashamed of his own helplessness. Although, inside that ruined temple, after looking at the various broken statues of the goddess scattered around the place, he made his decision. Still, it needs to be done. There have always been moments like this in his life. Even though I was scared, that was a path I needed to follow to overcome all of that. May the blessing of the Twilight Star be with us. He mounted his horse and rode out into the street where the enemies were, with the cart attached to the animal behind him. Naturally, they moved very slowly. Instead of running as fast as possible, it was more like a leisurely walk. It wasn't something stealthy. The wooden wheels creaked with every movement, and whenever these sounds echoed, Rottmiller felt like his heart would explode. Ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum. The blood rushed to his head, making him dizzy, but he tried to stay calm as much as he could. He was not as strong as Yandel's allies, who embarked on great adventures with him. He did not have the strength to cut through crowds of enemies with sheer skill, nor the ingenuity to escape danger like the talented mages. That's why, please. He prayed and prayed some more, hoping that this little trick would work. It was all he could do. However, it seemed his efforts were paying off. The first Noarch soldier he encountered merely stared at him for a moment. He didn't seem to find him suspicious or try to talk to him. It seemed the soldier saw nothing wrong with someone confidently pulling a cart down the street. He sighed in relief. He had thought the plan was barely viable when he first started, but when he realized it was working, all the tension left his body. However, that was just one person. Rang, rang. With how slowly he moved, there was still a long and painful road ahead. But this was nothing new to Rottmiller. Your life has always been like this. 2 people, 3 people. Only after 8 years of wandering the labyrinth did he manage to become a 7th-level adventurer. 4 people, 5 people, 6 people. Besides, he had started much later than the others. Most entered the labyrinth on the day they came of age, but his first time was at the age of 26. 10 people, 20 people, 30 people. Having started late, he ran with all his strength. But still, he ended up being left behind, having to endure the pain of being abandoned. Therefore, there was nothing new in this effort. Go slowly. He was already used to it, to the point of being tired. Maybe it was the only thing he was truly the best at in the world. No. At that moment, the 71st Noarch soldier he encountered suddenly stopped and walked over. Which squadron are you from? I need to check what's in your wagon. Surviving the game as a barbarian. Chapter 752, 1.2/5. The Noarchian who approached to check on the wagon did not seem to be acting out of duty or loyalty to his job. Despite his intimidating appearance, His posture and the way he spoke revealed another intention. What? Why don't you say anything? Are you hiding something valuable in there? Hearing this, Rodmiller realized. That man only wanted to satisfy his own greed. I only have food. He said this hoping the man would lose interest and leave, but the Noarchian just smiled at the excuse. Food. I should have come up with a better lie. Hey, partner. Don't be petty. Everyone just wants to live life. What do you want? Nothing much. Just share a little with me. We're all suffering here, aren't we? Rodmiller sighed inwardly. How had he ended up catching the attention of someone like that? No, perhaps he should consider himself lucky to have been approached by one of them. Maybe I can solve this just by talking. With this conclusion, Rodmiller removed some items of reasonable value from his treasury vault. That's all I can give you. Be satisfied with that. The items were his precious savings, but he didn't think it was a waste to lose them like this. If he could save Bjorn Yandel with just this, it would be cheap. Oh, those valuable things. There was a problem with the solution Rodmiller chose. Having retired as an adventurer and lived a quiet life teaching scouts in the sacred land of the barbarians, Rodmiller had forgotten. The beasts, greed was endless, and there were beasts in this world that spoke the language of humans. But, partner, I've been thinking about this a lot. If he appeared weak, he would be torn apart. I don't think that will be enough. Noarchian's voice was now filled with even more greed and confidence. It was very simple. Rodmiller seemed like an easy target, having given away something so precious at the slightest push. What do you have there? It must be something even better, if that's what you're offering me. Let me take a look. From the Noarchian's perspective, Rodmiller could only have given those items away because there was something even more valuable under the tarp. Didn't you hear? I said I want to check the wagon. The man, who had previously kept a certain distance, now assessed him with dangerous intentions and approached to check the contents of the cart, even if it was by force. Do you really need to check? That's what I said. A confident smile spread across the Noarchian's face, and Rodmiller's heart sank. In the end, that was all he could do. Making a split-second decision, Rodmiller nodded. Okay, you can look. But like I said, there's only food there. Shut up. Do you think I was born yesterday? Let's see what you've got hidden there. The Noarchian sneered at Rodmiller and approached the wagon. However, the moment his greedy hand approached the canvas, Rodmiller took out a dagger from the treasure vault and plunged it into the man's neck. Oh! The man didn't even seem to realize what had happened before collapsing to the ground. Rodmiller looked around slowly. Bah-dum. All the nearby Noarchians were looking at him. A ruckus had been caused, and in the end, a person had died. It was only natural that it would attract attention. However, Rodmiller finally understood. Although he had never fully understood when they explained it, he now knew what kind of place Noarch was. Even the Noarchians who were searching the surrounding area showed no suspicion when looking at him. There was no surprise or fear at the fact that someone had died. Only a thick layer of greed. That's why Rodmiller shouted to them. What the hell are you looking at? Get out of here and do your job, unless you want to die too. He shouted so as not to appear weak. However, those viscous gazes did not shift. Rodmiller pulled the dagger from the dead man's neck. Road, road, road. He cursed repeatedly as he sawed through the corpse's neck. He cut through the skin, separated the hard bones, and completely decapitated the man, impaling his head on a spike on the left side of the wagon. Why? Do you want to be placed on the right side? He asked the audience again. The Noarchians finally turned their attention away and went back to what they were doing before. Rang, rang. With that, the cart began moving again, now at a noticeably faster pace. Rang, rang. As he continued, he began to understand why goblins and orcs wore ornaments made of bones. They just looked uncomfortable in the eyes of humans. For savages, they were very convenient. Who is that guy? Where is he taking that wagon? Should I ask? Never mind. He seems out of it. Those watching him looked away, not wanting to get involved in trouble. They didn't even suspect that the Bjorn Yandel they were looking for was being taken away in the cart of that man who passed confidently with his head impaled on a spike. Rang, rang. And so, after continuing to advance at a faster pace, the wagon stopped again as the city walls became visible in the distance. Who are you? I think we have a similar hobby. How fun. A wizard with a staff appeared in the path of the cart. He didn't seem to mind the head being displayed, and neither did Rottmiller. But what are you trying to hide to do something so cute like that? A strong gust of wind began to swirl in front of him. The canvas covering the wagon was ripped off and thrown into the air. Then, what was hidden beneath it was exposed to the world. It was very unfortunate. It's Bjorn Yandel. Bjorn Yandel. Everyone in this town knew who he was. Thanks to the help of the bear that suddenly appeared, Parav managed to escape to the street. Boom. With the destruction of the well connected to the secret tunnel, the threat of pursuit was also eliminated. He also saw the faces of the people waiting for him in front of the well. Senhor Parav, starting with Lilith Maroni, who ran up to him with tears in her eyes, evacuees, including the bear's wife, came to thank him. Haha. Hello. Is this our first time meeting? I'm Hikurad Murad. I think I'm your superior in terms of seniority. Even a dwarf shook his hand with a hearty laugh. Superior. Ah, Mr. Murad was an ally of Mr. Yandel in the past. Parav nodded at Maroni's explanation. Now that he thought about it, he had heard a thing or two about someone who looked like him, maybe. Oh, he exclaimed when he realized. I heard you were working in a forge after you retired. That's right, replied the dwarf cheerfully. But now I'm in danger of losing my entire life savings. Ha ha ha, it's really amazing to find you like this. But why are you here? It's because of that friend over there. He said he would look for his wife on his own, but I couldn't let someone who got lost in his own backyard go alone. The dwarf gestured with his chin towards the bear and his wife, and only then did Parav greet the man properly. Su Abman Urikfried. Ah, I've heard of you. I'm Sven Parav. I'll say it again, but really, thank you very much. Call me whenever you need me, no matter what. I'll drop everything to come help you. Parav felt a strange emotion at this genuine display of gratitude. Fate really was mysterious. It was surprising that the woman he had saved just then was the wife of an old ally of Yandel, and thinking back, it seemed that saving his wife had ended up saving his own life. But have you two worked together before? Mr. Urikfried, Mr. Murad? Maroni asked. The dwarf answered for both of them. Ah, no, we never worked together. I'm much older than this friend here. Really, it's just that you two seem very close. We became friends by fate. The fact that we both run a store, that we both know how to hold our drinks, and the common connection with Yandel. Ah, I see. I figured maybe you two had been on the same team before, but it seems I was wrong. So that was it. It made sense. That day was also only happening thanks to the relationship between everyone being former allies of Yandel. So, who was on the same team as you, Mr. Murad? I know you were with Mr. Yandel, Miss Karlstein, and that wizard, but I don't think I've ever heard of the last one. Ah, Brown Rottmiller. He was the team's scout. In a way, he's this one's direct superior, isn't he? I heard he was teaching the young warriors to be scouts in the Holy Land. Oh, really? Now that I think about it, it's been a long time since we've seen each other because we've both been so busy. After this is all over, I need to visit him and have a drink or two together. The dwarf smiled with a nostalgic look. Whoosh! The gale that passed through the cart ripped off the canvas covering it and turned the situation upside down in an instant. Everyone fell silent, including the wizard, who had previously lifted the tarp playfully. Bjorn Yandel. It's Bjorn Yandel. Then the screams began, as if time began to flow again. However, Rodmiller felt no fear. Despite the panic that clouded his mind for a brief moment, he quickly regained his senses and began to think. District 4 was under Noarch's control. However, that didn't mean they had taken control of the wall between District 4 and the imperial capital. The palace still held dominion over the walls, and the Noarchians had set up a battle line a considerable distance away from the walls. Furthermore, excluding the area near the gate, the battle line wasn't very wide, so if I can just get through this place, everything would be fine. The palace soldiers were probably also watching from the wall. They would send reinforcements through the gates or do anything to save Yandel. I'm sorry. With that brief excuse, Rodmiller stuck an arrowhead into the rear of the horse he was riding. Relincho. The horse bolted forward in pain. The wizard, who had also been paralyzed upon seeing Bjorn Yandel, quickly rolled to the side to avoid being run over, clearing a path. Of course, the possibility of getting through the rest of the enemies and reaching the wall was close to zero. But it's not zero. Rodmiller had learned this naturally from living with the barbarians. Giving up without trying was the most foolish thing you could do. It was true, really. Failing was better than giving up. Bah dumb. Even more so when there was nothing to lose. That's right. It's Bahela. Rodmiller let out the battle cry, the one his ears were so used to hearing that it was sickening, for the first time in his life. Wow. As if responding to his shout, a true battle cry echoed back. Hearing the screams of countless barbarians, Rodmiller immediately recognized who he was. Huh, that voice is Einar, surviving the game as a barbarian. Chapter 753, 1.3/5. Living in the sacred land of the barbarians, there was one thing you could be sure of, the incessant refrain of their war cry, echoing thousands of times a day. Bahela. When eating, Bahela. When chopping firewood. The barbarians invoked the name of their ancestral god at all times, a habit so ingrained that Rodmiller had learned to distinguish them by that alone. War cries that seemed identical at first glance gradually revealed the unique inflections of their owners, subtle differences that identified each barbarian as unique. This battle cry in particular had three distinct characteristics that made it stand out. Braces awe. First, the beginning with B started low and then built up to the familiar scream. Second, the pause between the hell and the l was filled with a deep breath. Third, and most notably, the scream was from a woman. Einar. The moment he turned his head toward the sound, Rodmiller confirmed what he suspected. There was Einar, standing on top of a 4-story building, a pair of wings spread out behind her. The warrior held in her hand a green spear, which looked expensive even from a distance. It's the divine spear, someone in the crowd exclaimed. I swore she was near the dimensional square. Rodmiller didn't know why Einar was there, but did it really matter? The most important thing was that his chances of getting out of this mess had increased. Boom. With a great leap of 4 stories, Einar jumped off the building and ran straight towards the wagon. Relincho. A moment later, she was running alongside the horse with an arrow stuck in her rump, matching his pace as she said to Rodmiller, Speak, Scout. What do you need me to do? Like a good barbarian, she got straight to the point. I'm not very smart and I don't know what to do. So tell me, what do I need to do to save Yandel? That short sentence conveyed all her confidence in her judgment. Rodmiller held his breath, but suppressed the surge of emotion and found his calm. If she trusted him, she needed to reciprocate in kind. If we can reach the city walls, the palace soldiers will help us, so be direct. He welcomed the interruption. Clear the path before us. There it is. As soon as Rodmiller gave the order, Einar shot forward, spinning and thrusting his giant spear into the enemies in front of him. None of them could block it, succumbing as the wings on his back flapped incessantly. Rodmiller watched everything from behind. For a brief moment, he could almost mistake Einar for a Valkyrie sent from the heavens to save Bjorn Yandel. Wow, they were surrounded by enemies, but no one seemed capable of being an obstacle to the warrior. This allowed the wagon to advance quickly. The walls were getting closer and closer. If only things could be resolved so easily. A man appeared in their path, clearly determined to block their path. Rodmiller didn't know who the man was. However, he saw Einar's expression harden when he saw him, losing all the joy of taking down enemies. "You will have to go on your own," she said, her voice low and devoid of amusement. "I will leave Yandel to you, Scout." She stepped forward, and then the world was plunged into darkness. Open black lens bracket Roland Bonozant cast black demon eye. Close black lens bracket. Goosebumps ran down his skin. Hundreds of terrifying eyes peered through the darkness that had settled over the city. The world stopped, freezing everything in place except for two people. It was good to have come here. Strange lights shone in the man's eyes as he spoke. The warrior responded to his calm with a thrust of her spear and her characteristic war cry. Wow! The pressure of the attack caused winds to cut through the air, but his spear missed its target. Then, against all logic, the void of darkness broke and time began to move again. The confident man faltered, groaning at the unexpected blow as he staggered back. Einar advanced on him and shouted over his shoulder, "You're dead. Go." Rodmiller took the cart and drove on. In fact, he wasn't doing anything. As soon as the darkness dissipated, the horse galloped off again as before. All Rodmiller had to do was hold the reins and guide the animal in the right direction. The cart rattled as it moved, adding to the sounds of a fierce battle. Superhumans fought behind him, but Rodmiller did not turn to look. All he had to do was get the cart to the city walls. He put everything he had into achieving this. Get him. Stop him. Despite his determination, other soldiers who were hiding emerged again to chase him as soon as Einar disappeared. Furthermore, the wagon began to slow down. Curse. Honestly, it was to be expected. Even though it was a wheeled cart, the horse couldn't pull a barbarian of that size and wait indefinitely. He would eventually exhaust himself. Rodmiller let go of the reins and climbed onto the cart, firing arrows at the pursuers. However, it was not enough. He was not a strong person, not like Einar. They're just ordinary arrows. He's nothing special. The same people who had let Einar pass without resistance now mocked Rodmiller's relative weakness. Well, he consoled himself with the few arrows that found their target thanks to his seemingly weak skill. Get him. Still, the distance between the crowd and the cart began to close. He knew he was going to be caught. There was no way he could escape at this rate. A decision clearly needed to be made, but he didn't have time to think about all the variables. He's out of arrows. He ran out of arrows to use. Pishwu. An enemy projectile hit him squarely in the right shoulder, taking away his ability to use his arm. If he stayed in the cart, it would only increase the weight the horse had to pull. His thoughts tormented him. Is this how it ends? When he appeared in the sacred land, I thought I still had some stories to tell. Is this how my story ends? But no, it didn't have to end like this. There was a solution. They were chasing Yandel, not him. If he dropped that heavy barbarian on the ground, he might live. If he simply pushed him, he would reach the wall alive. And yet, I think I understand now. In the moments when he thought he would die in the sacred land, Rodmiller could not understand what his wizard friend was thinking when he made his final decision. Rodmiller had an idea, but something had escaped him, even when death almost overtook him. Now he understood. No matter how scared I am. Just like the barbarians who entered the labyrinth. Just like the warriors who laughed in the face of adversity. I can't run away. Like a gust of wind dispelling the fog, his mind cleared. Dwaki was not a great man, but someone ordinary, like him. He would also be afraid of death like anyone else. He would also be desperate to live one more moment. He would also think about his regrets and mistakes as he looked back and tried to fix them. But he didn't run away. He did everything he could, and that saved everyone else. Try. If it weren't for him, Rodmiller's story would have ended long ago. It was laughable to even debate it. He said his final goodbye to the man who could not hear him. I'm sorry, but you'll have to go on alone. Until the end, however, Rodmiller was truly ordinary. In a final act of repentance, he took a pen from his treasure chest and scribbled something on the man's palm. The situation did not allow him time to write anything in detail, but the gesture at least helped to appease one of his many regrets. Depending on how one interprets it, his last words could be seen as the written manifestation of his greedy nature. But I should have that right, at least. Rodmiller dropped his pen and drew his short sword, then jumped from the wagon to face them. And he fought. What's the matter with this bastard? Sharp blades cut into his body as the sound of the carriage moving away disappeared. He knew, even without looking back, that car was going in the right direction. Towards the high and imposing city walls. I woke up with my body aching, but my mind clear. It felt like I had woken up from a deep sleep, as if I had just come out of a long dream, but I couldn't remember what kind of dream it was. Where I was. From the ceiling, I could tell I was in the barracks of some camp. I propped myself up on my elbows to look around, but there were no further clues as to where I was. Perhaps it was similar enough to the palace soldiers' quarters that I remembered, but why would I be here, sleeping? Rodmiller. I began to piece together the fragments of memory from before I passed out. Thunder crashed, and I blocked it. When I regained consciousness, Rodmiller was beside me. What happened? I was confused. I needed information about the situation I was in. With that thought, I was about to get out of bed when a knight entered the quarters. It was a familiar face, the one who had disappeared along with Raven after I was pulled into the underworld by the corpse collector. Astaroda, the king's knight, Astaroda Baron, greeted me with a simple statement. You've finally woken up. Why am I here? I asked. Where's Raven? What would it be like if you asked one question at a time? Geez, pretty cold for someone who just woke up. Where's Raven? Don't worry, she's in a safe place. She should arrive soon. I already sent word to let her know. I sighed. Okay, then, tell me, where am I and why am I here? First, this is the imperial capital of Karnan. The reason a noble like you is in a common soldier's quarters is for safety. Security. The moment they know your location, thunder will fall again. I hesitated. What? It seems the Prime Minister is eager to fire you. Every time they find out where you are, he launches thunder at you. Okay, so it was really the Prime Minister who fired that. It was certainly important information, but it still didn't answer my question. Astaroda, I asked not why I am in the quarters, but what happened while I was unconscious. Oh, is that it? Astaroda muttered without caring much before starting to explain what had happened. It was easy to summarize. A second bolt of thunder struck, prompting Baron Wilkins, the fifth commander, to activate an ancient magic installed in the city, a teleportation spell with a long casting time. Because he cast it too early, it did not activate properly, meaning the landing location was determined randomly. So, in the end, everyone there was teleported to random places around the city. Isn't that better than everyone dying? Well, it was true. So I got lucky and landed here. Of course not. You fell right in the middle of enemy territory in District 4. You and another man who carried you here while you were unconscious. Another man? Rodmiller. Are you talking about Brown Rodmiller? Probably. What happened to him? Astaroda answered my hurried question with casual disinterest. He's dead. I froze as the answer echoed in my mind. What? According to a report from a patrol on the walls, as soon as the wagon you were in slowed down, he jumped out to block the enemies. In addition, Einar Fenelon also helped in his escape along with him, but was captured by the enemies. Rodmiller died and Einar was captured. My brain refused to function with the influx of information. Astaroda noticed and smiled. Despite appearances, you really are too soft. I'll be outside while you sort this out. Oh, and one more thing. When all I did was stare at him in bewilderment, he continued, your palm. With that, Astaroth left the quarters, leaving me alone on the edge of the bed, tormented. Finally registering his seemingly random final words, I raised my arm and turned my palm upward. A hurried message was written on it. Reading those words brought me straight back to reality. Please be kind to Miss Shaven. She is a good woman. This was not a dream. Surviving the game as a barbarian. Chapter 754. First point, 4/5. Excuse me, Elder. May I trouble you with a question? A white-haired man calmly took a sip of tea before replying, it's no problem at all. Just ask. Why did you try to stop him? My petty thoughts do not allow me to understand. What part don't you understand? To the old man's question, the man in the wolf mask replied, in exchange for reaching the Holy Land, a 7th-level adventurer named Brown Rotmiller died, and Sven Perev became a saint. Ah, though not yet completely, of course. As a result, he lost a useless scout, but gained an ally who will be a great asset in the future. And yet, you tried to stop him from reaching the sacred land. I was curious as to why. Ah, so that was it. The old man gave a seemingly benevolent smile. However, upon closer inspection, one could see a devilish glint playing in his eyes. It's no fun if I just tell you, he concluded. What did you say? Think for yourself. Why do you think I did this? Faced with another question, the masked man thought for a moment before carefully answering. I'm debating between 3 ideas. Continue. The first is that you already foresaw how he would act, Elder. I knew he would do the opposite of what I said, so I instructed him not to go to the sacred land. It's wrong. If that were the case, why would I have sent you to give useless advice? He would have gone down that path on his own, even if I didn't do anything. That's true. I've wondered about that too. And what is the second idea? Second, no matter where he went, Brown Rotmiller would have died anyway. Oh, of course, that doesn't explain why you tried to send him to District 7, but I imagine you might not have wanted Sven Perev to become a saint. That's an interesting idea, the old man allowed, intrigued. Go on. Well, you said in the past that Sven Perev is a soul born with a divine presence. One that allows even an evil god, with whom he never made a contract, to converse with him. I said, then perhaps you did not wish to see Sven Perev join forces with the evil god. In some ways, a Karui priest is stronger than a saint. Though in the end, he would still have been useful to that man. The old man smiled proudly. I did well to ask for your thoughts. That was a rather insightful line of reasoning. Are you saying this is wrong too? That's wrong. If he had gone to District 7, Sven Perev would have died. I see, the masked man lamented as if he had missed a test question, but continued speaking. My third idea is that Brown Rotmiller is worth more than a Saint Sven Perev. He didn't believe it even as he said it. After all, how could a retired 7th-level scout be more valuable than a paladin about to become a saint? Correct. How? Your third idea corresponds to my conclusion. Brown Rotmiller would have proved much more useful on his journey. The masked man couldn't understand. However, having observed the fates of countless people since he began following the Elder, he offered another theory to reinforce the idea. Then Sven Perev will become a negative influence on your journey. He spoke with conviction. There was no other explanation. The blessing was actually a curse. There were many such cases. After all, fate was a mysterious and capricious creature. Wrong again. The masked man nearly choked on an involuntary response, and the old man turned his gaze back to the window. Sven Perev will accomplish great things throughout his journey, as expected. Even so, you chose Brown Rotmiller over him. It is foolish to judge someone's future by their present alone. People become great not by their origins, but by their efforts. This is a world where even a beggar can become a king one day. So Rodmiller perhaps had the potential to achieve such greatness. The old man smiled at the binary vision, shaking his head. He had no such talent. However, one's worth is determined by how one's history is recorded. With a tone of regret, he revealed, if Brown Rodmiller had survived, he would have left an even greater mark on this world. Of course, in this world, that future no longer existed. From my point of view, I had just closed and opened my eyes. Nothing felt real, not something I had personally experienced, but rather secondhand information sent to me after it had all happened. I couldn't shake the hope that maybe, just maybe, they had gotten some details wrong. Please be kind to Miss Shaven. She is a good woman. But it was all real. Einar Fenelon had been captured by the enemy, and Brown Rodmiller, my first scout, was dead. These were the immutable truths. My fists clenched as my thoughts raced. What exactly went wrong? Before going to the Holy Land, Wolf told me that if I went to District 7, X would die, and if I went to the Holy Land, Y would die. So I assumed that X was Rodmiller. In the end, I headed to the Holy Land as I had initially planned, and managed to save X, Rodmiller, from danger. But Rodmiller was in the time all. Because I went to the Holy Land, Rodmiller died. There was no point in dwelling on useless thoughts, as if I had practically killed him by making this choice. There were things I could do and things I couldn't. I knew the difference between the two, and I wasn't the type to fall into depression over a failure. Yes, I wasn't, so why did I feel so bad? The violence etched deep into my barbaric body began to boil. I wanted to fight so I wouldn't have to think. I wanted to crush and destroy everything I saw. Still, I held myself back. The barbarian body I was in was different from Hansu Lee. A fit of rage wouldn't just end with a broken mouse and keyboard. A wise warrior needed to know when to fight and the right moment to release that emotion. At that moment, someone pulled aside the curtain at the entrance to the lodge and walked in. It was a familiar face, Arua Raven. But what was that? The moment our eyes met, Raven's mouth snapped shut. Her face lost all color, and her small, pale body began to tremble like a willow in the wind. What was that? Had something bad happened to her? The thoughts and desires I had just suppressed began to bubble up again. Sorry. Then I watched as Raven avoided eye contact and realized what had happened. I'll wait outside, until you calm down. Raven was afraid of me. I let out a long sigh, as if I was expelling all the poison accumulated in my body, and stopped her as she tried to leave the room in a hurry. Don't go. I've calmed down. Raven turned carefully and let out a sigh of relief of her own. After a long, hesitant pause, she summoned the courage to say a few words of comfort. I heard what happened. I didn't answer. If I spoke, the things I had just suppressed would come flooding back. However, I had to ask something. Do you know what happened to Rodmiller's body? I think it would be better if you didn't know. Don't worry about it and just tell me. I've calmed down. I still don't think you should. I said I'm fine. Raven just stared at me silently, without a trace of belief in her eyes. Only when the curtain to the living quarters was opened again, revealing Astaroda, did I get my answer. Noarch's soldiers cut off his head and took it away. If they confirm that he was their ally, it will be recognized as an achievement. Ba-dum. It seems like you were thinking of using the resurrection stone, but unfortunately, it won't work. My heart was beating so fast I wondered if it was still within healthy limits. I clenched my teeth so hard I thought they might start to crack. But how about doing something with that killing intent? I'm fine. Astaroda hesitated. But this one might faint. I looked at Raven. She was stiff as a board, so I controlled my anger with a sigh and brought up a new topic to distract myself. What happened to you two? And where is Vivian? After you disappeared with the corpse collector, the captain of the Oracles appeared. There was a battle. Anyway, long story short, we escaped first. What? Let me correct you. We didn't run away. we just retreated at the appropriate time. He claimed that it was to protect Raven, and that if it had been a fair fight, he could have definitely defeated him, but in the end, only Astaroth knew the truth. Anyway, what happened next was something like this. The captain entered the battle to attack me, but changed his target to Astaroth after realizing that he was the king's knight. While the captain pursued Astaroth, I narrowly escaped the underworld. After losing him, Astaroth entered the imperial capital and recovered from his injuries. Oh, and Vivian came with him, but was thrown in prison. That woman is no longer of any use. I thought about executing her, but kept her alive as a precaution. After regrouping, he thought about looking for me to meet up again, but he lost my location due to ancient magic. Sometime later, he learned that I had entered the imperial capital unconscious and quickly came to check on me. Now that that's settled, I want to ask you something. Where are you going now? At Astaroth's question, I closed my eyes for a moment. What did I need to do now? It didn't take long for me to make a decision. We need to save Einar first. Understood. Astaroth nodded and asked, but how? I didn't answer. I've told you this before, but I've only heard news that she was captured as a prisoner. We have no information about where she's being held or whether she's alive or not. Right, so I needed to gather information first. Astaroth, I have a request. Say, could you gather my scattered allies? Even just those in the districts within the palace's reach would help. You didn't even need to ask. It's already being done. Okay, I get it. Although he always seemed inflexible, he was smart in the way he approached his work. If you need anything or have a plan of action, call me. Astaroth then left the lodging, and I sat silently on the edge of the bed, reviewing all the information I had to see if I had missed anything. Every few minutes, I called Astaroth to see if there was any news. Where Einar was, if more of my allies had been thrown into enemy territory, whether the location of the Marquis had been determined. Given that it was wartime, I could only rely on the military intelligence network, and my heart continued to tighten as no useful news arrived. No, wait, but the information I was looking for came from a completely unexpected source. Thinking of the Marquis, I remembered Ragna, and thinking of Ragna, I remembered his right hand, Hyunbial. Thinking of Hyunbial, in turn, reminded me of that so-called love paper I received from her. It can't be. I rushed to grab the love paper, only to find that there was actually a message written on it. The content could be summarized in two pieces of information: Einar's supposed current location and Einar Fenelon, underground vault of the Central Bank of Almanus. Planned for execution. The current fate of Einar. Surviving the game as a barbarian. Chapter 755, 1.5/5. The Central Bank of Almanus was the center of the world's wealth, and when one considered all the treasures stored in its secret collection of private vaults, it was a true treasure worthy of a dragon. With so much wealth gathered in one place, security was extremely well configured. It was the perfect place to isolate a person of interest, much better than the Public Peace Bureau or the prison beneath the Adventurers Guild. But don't you think that's a little too obvious? So when I explained the situation to Raven, her response was exactly what I expected. Haran savvy. For starters, I don't know why you'd have a love interest with someone like her, but that woman is Countess Peprock's right-hand woman. You know, the one who's clearly in the Marquise's faction. This is a trap, no matter how I look at it. I don't really want to say this, but, Raven trailed off, silence hanging between us. Why do you think they captured Miss Einar and didn't kill her right away? I had to admit that his concerns aligned with mine. Raven didn't know that Haran Savvy was actually Hyunbial, nor did she know the relationship we had, and yet, I didn't believe that Hyunbial had allied herself with the Marquis and was deliberately sending me false information. Still, a trap is still a trap. The problem wasn't the informant named Hyunbial, but the fact that the information had reached me. If the Noarchians had really wanted to keep the information about Einar an absolute secret, it wouldn't have reached me. And considering how the Marquis operates, there was no chance of this being a trap. It was a certainty. The fact that Einar had been captured alive only confirmed it, just as Raven had said. I had assumed they would use her as a bargaining chip to negotiate with me, but an execution. It was laughably transparent. And yet, perhaps that is it. Maybe this was my chance. The information had reached me through Hyunbyo, and the palace hadn't heard about it yet, at least not yet. That meant the Noarchians probably didn't even realize I already had this information. There was no way to avoid the trap, but if I was right and the trap had not yet been fully set. We need to hurry. Time was of the essence. Across the street from the Almanus Central Bank was a building that was previously the headquarters of the Almanus business. Far from being the commercial hub it should have been, the site had long since been looted and reduced to ruins. In this vestige of a once prosperous trade, a woman hid in silence. Miss Emily, be quiet, I'm thinking. Amelia Rainwales watched through the window. Although she didn't look at him, the man beside her seemed to know what she was thinking just by the expression on her face. Not even you could do it, Miss Emily. I'm not going to suggest that we should go to District 3 or the Imperial Capital, where it would be safer, but could you please hide and rest? At least until you recover from your injuries. All-In's voice held concern and sincerity. There was no telling how people would react to finding out he had been a looter in the past. However, he considered Amelia and Yandel to be his benefactors, the ones who had rescued him from that life. He couldn't just stand by and allow one of his saviors to actively put herself in danger. Besides, he added, his tone hardening to brook no argument. You don't even have an arm now. Amelia had suffered a serious injury to her right arm during the pursuit of Noarch. It wasn't that the arm had been completely severed, but in some ways, that might have been more favorable. The arm was torn apart, split in half down to the muscles and bones, and due to a specific essence of Amelia's, she couldn't use potions to heal herself. We just managed to stop the bleeding, All-In insisted, his voice almost pleading. What do you hope to accomplish under these conditions? He tried everything, even kneeling down and practically begging her to stop. Still, Amelia didn't blink. I said I'm thinking. Her unwavering calm only made All-In even more nervous. He had spent enough time around her to know what thinking really meant to her. She wasn't deliberating whether to act. Her decision had already been made. The only point left to contemplate was how. Do you think Captain Yandel would approve of what you are doing now? He shot back, playing his last card, the strongest in his deck. Finally, this caught his attention. Amelia's gaze shifted from the window to him. She said nothing, but the silent intensity of her gaze was overwhelming. Yet, despite the tremor that ran through his body, All-In refused to look away. All-In Rockrobe, she said, breaking the silence. You're crossing the line. I have no choice. If I want to bring someone back who crossed the line, I have to cross it too. Her determination hung in the air, unmoved by the cold fury that threatened to erase it. Then, with a sigh of resignation, Amelia relented. Even I know this is dangerous, but there is no other option, she said softly, her tone unexpectedly gentle. Why is there no other option? Because I don't want Einar Fenelon to die. That was, in many ways, the reason they had come there. Einar had been captured and, coincidentally, carried down the same street where the two were hiding. After secretly following the train, they watched as Einar was taken inside the bank. Why do you think they're going to kill her? They took her prisoner, which means they don't plan on killing her anytime soon. Right. They must be plotting something, like using her to negotiate with the palace or the captain. That's a possibility. Okay. So for now. But what if that's not it? She interrupted him before he could finish his sentence. What if we keep waiting because we think there's still time, and then because of that, she dies? All-In hesitated, The word stuck in his throat. Even if that happens, Miss Emily, you surely know that no blame would fall on you. It wasn't empty comfort, he truly believed every word. Yet as he spoke, his eyes shifted, unable to meet hers for a reason he couldn't explain. She noticed, of course she noticed, and a faint smile curved her lips. There's no need for that, she assured him. You're not wrong. She had thought the same way, as had so many other people like them. They both knew what it meant to live to survive, at any cost. Excuse me, oh, so that means, that's enough. Amelia ended the conversation there. Communicating had never been easy for her, and she doubted she could convince him with words alone even if she tried. In fact, she didn't even know where to begin explaining her position. I'll be careful, stay here and keep hidden. His parting words were not a request, but an order. Aoyan no longer tried to object. Right, please be careful. Amelia did not respond. One moment she was there, and the next, she was gone from his sight. Alone in the empty third-floor office, Aoyan peered out the window at the bank's main entrance, searching for any sign of her. But no matter how hard he looked, Amelia was nowhere to be seen. It was to be expected, really. There was no way she could have simply walked through the front door. And even if she had, she was so stealthy that their eyes would never have noticed her. I pray for your safety. Although he was not a religious man, Aoyan closed his eyes to pray. When all that was left in the room was him and his prayer, he kept his vigil, watching the bench from afar, just in case something happened. Time passed slowly until suddenly, a voice startled him from behind. What? There's someone right here. I told you, didn't I? I detected a life force. Aoyan turned around quickly in panic. He was so focused on what was happening outside that he didn't notice the intruders inside. Smack! A blunt instrument struck his head, and he crumpled to the ground. As his consciousness began to fade, he heard the Noarchians talking. So, who is this guy? Isn't that one of Yandel's allies who split up? It doesn't look like it. If it did, it wouldn't be knocked down with a single blow. Well, you're either a civilian hiding in District 4 or one of the adventurers who were defeated earlier today. From what I heard, some medium-sized clans were mixed in with those hundreds of barbarians. Then he must be one of them. They tried to figure out who he was. Fortunately, or unfortunately, depending on your point of view, they didn't realize that he was a member of the Anabata clan. Now if only that would give him a way out. So, what will we do? What else? Let's take him back to headquarters, as usual. They're getting desperate already. I heard they're out of fuel for the magic weapon. But we're so far from headquarters. They'll still pay us for it. And this guy also seems to have consumed some essences. Come on, it'll be enough for a little change. Okay, let's do this. I don't think we'll find anyone else around here either. The man then stopped mid-sentence. Wait a second, he's still awake. Crack. That was the last thing Aoyan remembered. Greed leads to ruin. Aoyan Rockrobe had always agreed with this saying. After all, the only reason he had survived until now was because he had never let greed take root in his heart. Next, he gave up his dream of becoming a great adventurer. Instead, he learned navigation. Next, although he ended up in a cruel clan that treated him like a slave, he was grateful to have enough food to eat and time to sleep. He never dared to wish for anything more than that. Next, it was the same when he was taken in by the barbarians. Even confined underground, deprived of sunlight, he was content just to be alive and had no dream of escaping. Next, the result of his temperance was that they slowly began to accept him. And in doing so, they saved him. Sure, he was humiliated, being called Rock, or Nguyen, for example, but that was irrelevant. Whenever they ate the food he prepared or praised him for his good work and duty, something inside him began to fill, a well that he thought would remain forever dry. Well, He felt more like an employee who did odd jobs than a true ally of Yandel, but still. Next. So what? Were the heroes really that perfect? Next. Of course not. People like him had their place, too. He knew he was contributing to their journey in his own way, and that belief motivated him to work harder than ever. He studied cookbooks when he went shopping, became skilled at handling horses, and continued his studies in navigation in case the Anabata clan ever needed to operate on the 6th floor or sail again. He must have forgotten, if only for a moment. Next. Greed leads to ruin. A snake cannot become a dragon just because it traveled alongside one. This must also be fate. All-in considered his current situation natural. How could it not be? He was obviously just a burden, a parasite who didn't know his place and yet followed them around. It was only right that things should end this way. Didn't you hear me say? Next. An armored soldier grabbed him by the collar and shoved him toward a massive machine. It was as crude and simple in form as it was in function. A pillar that extended into a tank where people were indiscriminately thrown, one after another, for reasons he didn't need to know. So, this is how I die. For a man who had spent his life suppressing his desires, resignation came as naturally as breathing. He didn't even consider resisting, even when the hand on his neck began to choke him. He could take 1 or 2 people with him, sure, but then what? He would be tortured, interrogated, and meet an even more horrible end. No, letting the machine take him seemed like a much cleaner way to go. Wait, stop. Just as his head was about to be pushed over the seemingly bottomless abyss, someone approached and spoke, granting a brief reprieve. The one responsible for interrupting his execution was a man dressed in a knight's uniform. He stepped forward, grabbed All-in's chin even though his neck was still pinned, and nodded to himself. Looking again, I'm sure. All-in Rockrobe. Even if he doesn't look like it, he's a member of the Anabata clan. Are you sure? I don't know where they found him, but I'm going to take him away from here. His lordship will decide his fate personally. With that, he was handed over to the knight and dragged away. When he regained control of his thoughts, he found himself staring into the watchful eyes of a middle-aged man, exuding an unsettling authority. All-in knew who it was the moment he saw him. I brought him, as ordered, Lord Marquis. And he is untied because, came the Marquis's immediate response. Almost stumbling over the words in his defense, the knight explained. Although he is an ally of Yandel, he is only the group's navigator. His estimated combat ability is below that of an orc, so there is nothing to worry about, my lord. Understood. The Marquis seemed satisfied with the explanation and did not comment further. For a moment, All-in's mind went blank. Then, realization came. They don't know. Of course, he thought. It was natural. Although the palace knew that Yandel had obtained that essence, they could not imagine that he would have given it to All-in. And since he had never had the opportunity to use it before, there was no risk of the information being leaked. Could it be? This could be an opportunity. Speak if you want to live. There was no hesitation. It was a completely new experience for All-in, who agonized over the smallest decisions, like which eggs to buy at the grocery store. But this time, he didn't even need to think. How much value do you think you have to Bjorn Yandel? The question had barely left the Marquis's lips when All-in activated his ability. An instant activation, impossible to dodge, also impossible to block, with impressive destructive capacity at its core. Low soul power cost, short cooldown, and a skill that Yandel had once praised. None other than the skill of the third-tier monster, Belerios. Open black lens bracket. All-in Rockrobe cast Shatter. Close black lens bracket. Power exploded from his hand towards the target, and then, the mastermind of the war, the former Prime Minister of Raftania, Marquis Tersarian. He was a man All-in had never dreamed of crossing paths with under normal circumstances, and now he was also a legendary enemy, a traitor everyone in the city wanted to kill. This once great man collapsed, blood dripping from his lips. Surviving the game as a barbarian. Chapter 756. Hostage 1/4. So you're saying that Marquis Tersarion coughed up blood, collapsed, and is now on the verge of death. The despair the Castellan of Noark felt upon receiving the report was indescribable. No, despair could come later. His first reaction was complete disbelief. And who could blame him? How does that make sense? Countless knights and mages were part of the Marquis's personal guard, all trained by him from a young age to be true human golems, indoctrinated in such a way as to erase any concept of betrayal from their minds. Once, the Castellan even envied the Marquis and told him that perhaps he wouldn't need to be so afraid if he had people like that around him. And yet, now, did they break through that impenetrable defense? This hermetic security had been breached. Even if he is an ally of Yandel, isn't he just a 7th-level navigator? The Castellan simply couldn't believe it no matter how many times he heard it. Even if the supposed 7th-level navigator had acquired a 3rd-level essence, what was the Marquis thinking? He had brought the man so close to himself without even placing an essence seal on him. Well, the subordinate ventured hesitantly, I suspect they were extremely confident in their own information. Let's assume the Marquis fell for it. Did none of the guards around him question that decision, not even once? The subordinate remained silent in the face of the Castellan's fury, not for lack of words, but because he knew that nothing good would come from a response at that moment. Serving a lord himself, he could imagine that the Marquis's guards would have anticipated that the navigator might attempt to assassinate him. However, they had probably expected something like a fireball or a thrown weapon at most. With the Marquis so close to them, they had probably assumed that they would see the attempt and stop it on the spot, perhaps even managing to say something heroic like, "A useless act. Are you safe, my lord?" It wasn't a bad plan. Especially if no one got hurt. The Marquis would be pleased with his subordinate's abilities and confident that his money had not been wasted, and his subordinates would feel more confident asking for a raise the following month. But unfortunately, perhaps because they are the Marquis' closest aides, they are intelligent, but also treacherous. I will need to remember that later. The Castellan of Noark might have been more sympathetic to their feelings if things hadn't ended this way, but there was no room for that now. What should have remained an attempt had been successful, the Marquis might very well have been assassinated that day. These fools. The Marquis's companions were now nothing more than a bunch of idiots. However, the Castellan was not going to join them in voicing such thoughts out loud. Why should he? The Castellan was not angry with him, and no good would come of a superior knowing the thoughts of a subordinate like him. As expected, the Castellan let out a deep sigh. He was also an intelligent man, and he did not take his anger out on the people involved. Instead, he allowed only a trace of his frustration to show as he asked the servant, "So tell me. I understand that the assassination attempt was successful, but what do you mean by him being on the verge of death?" It was a reasonable question for the Castellan to ask. The Marquis was not a poor commoner who had no access to the priest's healing. Being on the brink of death made no sense. Either you were alive or you were dead. Good. At the Castellan's question, the servant closed his eyes, preparing himself for what was to come. To be more precise, he is not on the verge of death. In fact, he had never used those exact words before. Although the servant realized the misunderstanding, he did not correct the Castellan immediately. There was no reason to do so, not with the atmosphere already tense. Even so, the servant continued with the explanation before the Castellan could blame him for the discomfort caused by the mistake. The Marquis has an artifact that can save his life, but it forces him to remain unconscious for 2 days. He omitted the artifact number and name because it was not important at the moment. I don't know if I should feel relieved, the relatively intelligent superior, now understanding the situation, asked. And the authority to use the magic weapon still lies solely with the Marquis. Yes. So that means we can't use thunder for 2 days. Try. The ancient weapon, considered more strategically valuable than even the Orkul's captain, had been reduced to a mere pile of scrap metal, all because of a single 7th-level navigator. And what happens to the plan? Although the plan was clearly defined, the subordinate who had served that superior had long enough to understand what he meant. The authority to use the divine spear Einar to capture Bjorn Yandel has been temporarily transferred to the eldest son, Eltora Tersarian. What if something happens to him in the meantime? This would complicate the situation. Not even the meticulous Marquis would have selected a replacement for his temporary replacement. The real answer would be, we don't know, unless, of course, someone intervened. If that is the case, the Castellan pondered, realizing that this was an external problem rather than an internal one, which meant that the alliance treaty could be reinterpreted completely. Knowing this, the subordinate summarized the thought in a simple sentence. Then you could temporarily assume authority, Lord Castellan. Understood. Hearing the answer he wanted, the Castellan visibly relaxed. Only then did he ask a question that intrigued him personally. And what happened to that navigator? Good. Noticing that his superior seemed calmer, the servant began to speak in a more relaxed tone. His first reaction upon awakening in a dark underground prison was this. Why am I alive? In a world where failure to pay taxes was an offense punishable by death, the relentless struggle to survive from moment to moment was the natural state of affairs. As a resident of such a world, Ian Rockrobe understood the value of life, or rather, he knew how precious his life was, perhaps more than anyone else. And yet, how am I alive? More than relief at being alive, he was confused. Of course he was relieved, but the confusion hung over him much more intensely. Which made sense, actually. It was like watching a massive meteor crash to the ground and yet waking up unharmed. A survivor's thoughts would probably not be of surprised joy, but of sheer bewilderment. He began to replay the events that led to his loss of consciousness. The moment the Marquis collapsed, spitting blood. My lord, some high-ranking servants, who seemed to be mages or priests, rushed towards the Marquis in a state of panic. A murderer. The knights, whose only function was to use their strength, rushed towards him and subdued him. He then fell to the ground, completely restrained. And, completely restrained, was no exaggeration. Arms, legs, neck, ankles, left thumb, middle finger, ears, the knights had him bound as if they were trying to seal a great demon. Well, thinking back now, it was understandable. They couldn't just stand by while the Marquis collapsed. The thought of retreating just because other knights were present wouldn't even have crossed their minds. Ian couldn't even breathe under the crushing weight of the dozen knights restraining him, and his consciousness began to fade at that moment. And when he opened his eyes, he was there. Seriously, why am I alive? A curious fact about consciousness is that, even when dying of asphyxiation, the mind can absorb information clearly. The Marquis lost consciousness. That damn bastard. Why did you just arrest him? Kill him now. Anger and hatred towards him, the murderer. That was why he couldn't believe he was actually alive. Only a biting cold permeated that underground prison in response to his confusion. Ian continued to ponder the reason for his survival, and the question evolved from, why am I alive? To, why did they keep me alive? Soon, his question was answered by a stranger who personally came to the supposed underground prison to clear up his confusion. I am Eltora Tersarian. The man revealed himself to be the son of the Marquis. I have something to ask you. At first, Ian wondered if he would be asked to endure a painful death after horrific torture. Please save me. However, Ian was left speechless by the man's request. Also, what was going on? The act of waiting may seem passive at first glance, but it has nuances depending on how you look at it. Just look in the dictionary. Passive. The subject is moved by an external force. Active. The subject moves on its own. If someone waits of their own free will, then they are actively waiting. On the other hand, If someone is threatened with a knife and forced to wait, they are passively waiting. Amelia Rainwales was part of the first group. His body had not yet fully recovered, and upon assessing the situation, he realized that his rescue target was still fine. The best decision at that moment was to wait for a better opportunity rather than act rashly. Of course, she would be forced to act if she noticed any suspicious movement before then. With her decision made, Amelia waited. She didn't feel bored or anything. With countless infiltration and assassination experiences under her belt, she was used to waiting. He felt a twinge of irritation when he heard that his target was so relaxed that he was snoring in his sleep, but that didn't change what he needed to do. She controlled her breathing and erased her presence. She opened her ears, listened to conversations, and slowly accumulated information in her mind. Although the information seemed trivial, it could be used to make better decisions in the future. And some of it was actually useful. Like this particular information. I don't understand why they sent us to watch this woman. Instead of wasting manpower like this, why don't we just kill her? TSC, you're being very short-sighted. Short-sighted. What does that mean? It means you can only see things that are close by. Think about it. Why do you think the higher-ups captured the divine spear alive and locked her up like this? Just tell me. The divine spear is bait. To catch an even bigger fish. For a bigger fish. To catch the giant. That's right. If it weren't for that, we wouldn't be wasting so much strength just watching a captured barbarian. After hearing this theory, the man didn't say anything else. He just looked at the person explaining it to him before asking, "Did you think of all this on your own?" Haha, as if I could. I only heard that from someone who was assigned to this mission. It seems like they were at the headquarters before us. And have you also heard about Myopic, or whatever with him? Isn't it obvious? These more educated guys always use big words. Hidden on the ceiling, Amelia couldn't ignore what she had just heard. From the way the conversation unfolded, this wasn't just a theory invented by the two of them, but the official plan. So it was bait to attract Yandel. While she was pleased that she had come to save Einar, even against Owen's advice, she also felt the weight of time. The situation was now a race against the clock. She needed to act before Yandel fell into the trap. It was obvious that the barbarian would rush to save his ally the moment he learned of the situation, even though he knew it was a trap. The best thing would be to resolve everything before he arrived. There was no doubt about it. But how? The answer to your question came from an unexpected source. Go out for a moment. I have business with that woman. The two guards, who boasted about the high security of the place, moved away under the orders of a man, who then entered the area where Einar was being held. Eltora Tersarian. Amelia's eyes shone as she crouched in the darkness. Although she didn't know what that man's purpose with Einar was, it was clear that it wasn't good. He was the Marquis' son, perhaps the greatest evil of the age. It was obvious that he was up to something. What? Damn, he was captured. After confirming who was walking beside the Marquis's son, Amelia pursed her lips as she simulated scenarios in her mind. If I act now, while he doesn't even know I'm hiding above him, she could not only slit his throat, but subdue him. And the fact that she could subdue him also meant that she could threaten and control him. There will be no better opportunity than this. With that thought, it didn't take long for her to spring into action. Momentary decisions worked best when combined with intuition. Now, Amelia threw off her camouflage, jumped from the roof, and dove down. Her target looked up and noticed her in that moment, but it was already too late to react to her blade. After falling from the ceiling, Amelia used her legs to clamp down on Eltora's neck. Then, with her only usable hand, she struck out with a dagger shrouded in an electric blue aura. Flop. The dagger stopped right in front of Eltora's dilated pupils. You die if you make noise. You also die if you move. And you die if you try anything. If you understand, kneel down slowly. SSRTA. Emily, you can thank me later. He's on our side. That man is, our side. What was he saying? Maybe. So you've already been brainwashed. What? Brainwashing? It's nothing like that. Those evil bastards. No. I'm completely fine. In the end, he had to explain the whole situation to Amelia, and it took a long time for her to accept it. So, he betrayed his father and is trying to ally himself with us. Yes, that's right. Ian nodded as vigorously as he could. Surviving the game as a barbarian. Chapter 757. Hostage 2 quarters. The loud, ogre-like snoring echoed like a soundtrack in the destroyed underground vault of the Bank of Almanus. There, Amelia let out a sigh as she looked at Einar. Not that she was disappointed in her. They used some drugs on her. Although she had spoken to Einar from a relatively close distance and for a significant period of time, Einar showed no signs of waking up. The fact that she was being forcibly kept unconscious by drugs seemed to be the only. Suddenly, Einar let out a groan in her sleep. Amelia rushed over to her, realizing that she would need to help her if she couldn't regulate her breathing. However, her concern was unnecessary. MMPH. Einar rubbed his stomach a few times before turning to his shoulder. Hunk. Then he started snoring even louder than before. Amelia stared at her, wondering if the barbarian was really drugged or just deeply asleep. No, it can't be. No, not even a barbarian would be so oblivious to danger in a situation that threatened his personal safety. So, shouldn't we wake her up now? What? Einar Fenelon is currently under the influence of a drug. Ian nodded, as if he had only just realized. And even. Amelia chose to ignore Eltora Tersarian, the man who would go down in history as a notoriously disloyal son, as he muttered, "Damn it. Was there any report of this?" The drug excuse would be less embarrassing for everyone. Not that it mattered much, considering the delicate situation they were in. Can I continue with my story? Asked Eltora. Amelia composed herself, turning Einar's attention back to him. Where did we leave off? Her short question had an icy tone, and the look in her eyes proved that she was still on guard against him. It was only natural, since Eltora Tersarian was trying to betray her father and ally herself with their side. After a long conversation, she accepted that he was not being controlled or manipulated. However, accepting the truth was a completely different matter. I was talking about how beneficial it will be for the palace and the Anabata clan if you accept my suggestions. That's true, but it's not necessary. Amelia didn't care about getting something out of the situation. Or, more precisely, she didn't see the need to keep listening. Her reasoning was this: use the Marquise's son as a spy. There was no point in wasting time articulating the strategic advantage of this. She decided to focus on what was most important. Why are you trying to betray your father? Motivation, the factor that drove people to act and create new situations. As I said before, my biggest reason is to survive. Have you concluded that the palace will win this war? Of course. Going against the palace is insane from the start. At first glance, it seemed like a logical decision. However, Amelia knew that everyone carried greed in their hearts, and even a shred of that greed had the power to drive someone to absurd extremes. But if you succeed, she hinted, won't you lose that princely life you led? It was human nature to focus on the one reason for success and ignore the 99 reasons for failure. But how was the Marquise's son able to make this decision so quickly? From the looks of it, he took it as soon as the Marquis collapsed. How was this possible? The answer was quite simple. Not at all. Even if the revolt succeeds, it would be difficult for me to maintain my current lifestyle. My father. Eltora hesitated. No, Marquis Agony Lawton Tersarian wants to get rid of me as soon as possible. I don't understand. Why would the Marquis do this to his eldest son? I myself didn't understand until much later. The Marquis treats me like this because he knows what I am. And, what are you? Eltora gave a bitter smile at Amelia's question. Then, she answered briefly, as a barbarian would. I am an evil spirit. In a sense, it was his first confession in life. Ha! That wasn't so hard. Even as his heart pounded with adrenaline and excitement, Eltora also felt an unfamiliar sense of freedom, a feeling he had only experienced at that moment. In Rockrobe, the navigator who had managed to injure the Marquis, was in shock to discover that the Marquis's son was an evil spirit. Oh, and Amelia Rainwales, a professional at hiding emotions and an assassin of Noarchian origin, showed open interest in the revelation. Suddenly, everything made a little more sense. If what he said was true, Eltora Tersarian's betrayal was neither unexpected nor strange. On the contrary, the cause and effect were absolutely clear and natural. However, at this point, I've practically put my life in your hands. So, can you trust me now? Even so, Amelia did not nod. This was part of her suspicious nature. A confession was just a confession. There was no evidence. What if it was a lie too? Fortunately, she had her own ways of discerning the truth. A metal object that flies through the sky. A plane. A dwarf gave a poisoned apple to a princess, and she died. What was the princess's name? Are you talking about Snow White? SquarePants? SpongeBob? No, how do you know that? I trust you. You are an evil spirit. Using the otherworldly knowledge she had obtained from Hansu Lee, Amelia came to the final decision. Eltora Tersarian was definitely an evil spirit. Although she had stumbled upon the knowledge about Snow White and could not answer, this was within the acceptable margin of error. Even people born in the same world had differences in level of knowledge. Most likely, Eltora simply did not have access to such resources. Remembering her time in Noark, where she couldn't receive an education even if she wanted to, Amelia felt a certain sense of kinship with Eltora. However, she didn't mention it out loud. What? He asked cautiously. What kind of look is that? It's nothing. Whatever. So you trust me now? Of course, I resolved all the doubts I had about you. Eltora was elated at this. After presenting all the evidence he could gather, he had finally managed to prove his trustworthiness to this disbeliever. So now you're going to accept me? His question, born from remnants of insecurity, was met with shocking and disheartening news. That, unfortunately, is not for me to decide. It's not up to you. What do you mean? It's exactly what it sounds like. The captain of the Anabata clan is Yandel, and the vice-captain is another woman. What are you? Eltora felt more betrayed now than when he was discarded without reason by the Marquis. Knowing that his life was hanging by a thread, he tried to argue as best he could. Don't try to lie to me. I know a lot about your organization too. No, even if you say that. You are Yandel's woman. Amelia blinked in surprise. Besides, from what I heard, among the many women Yandel has, you are the one he trusts the most and relies on the most. He always asks for your advice and opinions on what he does. And now you're saying it's not your decision. I don't know if I would say that much. You're practically one with Yandel. Also, then if you're going to refuse me, at least be honest. Everyone in the world already knows that if Baron Yandel starts taking wives, you'll be his first choice. First wife. Who else would it be? The spirit of blood, who lost himself in the bloodlust because of the war. Karlstein, who has nothing to show other than being part of his original team. Or Raven, who is already on the palace side. Or that divine spear with muscles instead of brains. I never even considered the idea of. Don't even try to say you don't have influence. I know Yandel values you and trusts you more than anyone else. Perhaps because of the stress of betraying her own father, Eltora poured out all the feelings of injustice she felt, driven by her emotions for the first time in a long time. Welcome to the group. And somehow, that was enough for him to get exactly what he wanted. Einar Fenelon had a thought as he calmly kept his eyes closed. Can I wake up now? In fact, she hadn't just woken up from her deep sleep. She had regained consciousness a long time ago, but she pretended to be asleep. And that was for a very simple reason. Ah, that's true, but it's not necessary. When she woke up, she heard Amelia's voice, which meant that the allies she trusted to rescue her had arrived. Naturally, Einar was very happy. However, Einar Fenelon is currently under the influence of a drug. Having learned something about this previously, Einar interpreted those words as orders that meant, "Don't wake up yet." So she kept her eyes tightly closed and felt that there was no need to rush. Although she didn't have concrete proof of this, she didn't doubt her decision. For barbarians, knowing when to lie down and sleep was as easy as knowing when meat was ready to eat. Anyway, that was it. Where did we stop? I was talking about how it will be beneficial to the palace and the Anabata clan if you agree to my suggestions. Amelia was having a rather serious conversation with a mysterious man. As he listened, Einar realized that the man was the Marquise's son. My head. With a sudden headache, Einar decided to continue pretending to be asleep for a while longer, which led to the current situation, the silence that hung after the conversation ended. I think I should get up now. After deciding that it was the right time to act, Einar yawned as naturally as possible and sat up. Oh, don't worry, I'm on the same side as you now. The man met his gaze and tried to explain the situation quickly before any misunderstandings occurred. Smash. Still, she punched him in the face. Stop. He's on our side. Emily naturally interrupted her, and only then did Einar calm down. Oh, really? Sorry, I didn't know. It wasn't like she didn't really know. She knew very well that he was on their side after hearing their conversation. Still, she couldn't understand why she punched him anyway. After waking up, Einar thought deeply for the first time in a long time, and as someone who had always been called brilliant since he was young, he quickly found an answer. Besides, from what I heard, among the many women Yandel has, you are the one he trusts the most and relies on the most. The fact that false information had been shared, she didn't care. Humans were a treacherous race who couldn't live without lies. Everyone already knows that if Baron Yandel starts taking wives, you will be his first choice. Likewise, it was understandable that he would think that the great warrior's legitimate wife would be a human. After all, he was human. He just doesn't know what barbarians are like, or that divine spear with muscles instead of brains. These words should have been a compliment to her, but for some reason, she felt offended by them. Still, that wasn't the reason either. Why? Just because. Wow, so suddenly, I just wanted to do that. That was the answer Einar found. Surviving the game as a barbarian. Chapter 758. Hostage 3/4. Rafdania was a cruel city, even more so for those who were evil spirits. Waking up in another person's body, without any knowledge of what was happening, forced evil spirits to fight desperately for survival, and could still meet death due to a simple, unfortunate stroke of bad luck. However, for Eltora, things were different. He was not particularly brilliant, nor did he possess any extraordinary talents. No, he had something even more special than anyone else. His surname was Tersarian. Honestly, nothing more needed to be said. The surname Tersarian meant he was the son of the second most powerful man in the nation, and that was enough to transform Eltor's story from a struggle for survival to just living in another world. It wasn't as if he didn't have his own hardships, but unlike the other evil spirits who had to live like cockroaches at the bottom of the social ladder, he enjoyed a comfortable life. Until that damned, wretched Marquis. The Marquis suddenly went mad, allied himself with Noark, and took up arms against the palace. From that moment on, Eltor's starting point was reduced to the same as the other evil spirits. Like the others, he began to worry about his survival. Therefore, even when he was ordered to lead the Marquis, forces and collaborate with the Noarchians. After being involved in the war, he obediently followed. Who could blame him? While on Earth, guilt by association was largely dismissed, this was a different world, with a more medieval setting. There was no need to mention what would happen to the son of the traitor who orchestrated the war. In short, he had no choice but to ally himself with the Marquis. However, thinking back, this was the biggest mistake of his life. I never imagined there was a secret like that. After joining the Noarchians, he began to secretly investigate what was happening, driven by the restlessness in his heart. The result of his investigation was the discovery of a shocking secret hidden in the Marquis mansion. A huge secret that answered all the questions and suspicions he had up until that moment. And that secret was smash. Eltora's train of thought was interrupted when Einar slapped her on the back. What is the meaning of this? He protested, indignant. I just felt like it. He almost exploded in anger, questioning how things had gotten to this point, upon seeing that Barbarian's calm expression. However, he chose to control himself. The people before him, they were his only chance of salvation. If I can prove to Baron Yandel that I betrayed the Marquis and contributed greatly to his defeat, then I can survive. It wasn't just a distant hope, he was sure it was possible. After all, that man was the most famous hero in the city. One word of confidence from the Baron and the son of the traitor could become the ally of the great hero, who betrayed his own father for justice. And so, Eltora bit her tongue despite the pain in her back. Even if he asked her why, she would just say that she wanted to hit him. Stop it. If you keep smiling like that, I'll be forced to think you're a bit loose. That damned barbaric woman, why the hell did Yandel keep a violent and foolish woman as an ally? Oh, right, he's a barbarian too. As quickly as the thought had come, it was gone, as she accepted the facts and simply stopped resisting, largely ignoring the withering look he gave her. Einar, father, fortunately, Yandel's lawful wife candidate, seemed to have common sense and saved him from further humiliation. If you act like that again, I will have no choice but to do the same to you, she warned. Oh, okay, I won't hit him. Sorry, the woman said, turning to Eltora. She can be a bit childish sometimes. It's okay. We have more important things to think about. I won't worry about small details like that. In that sense, what do we do now? First, we need to inform Yandel. If he simply barges into this place, it will cause trouble. You don't need to worry about that. The Prime Minister planned to disclose the location of the Divine Spear only after all the traps were set in this place. Yandel would never think of coming here before then. Never, you say, but we better prepare ourselves, just in case. As expected of a wife, you are quite wise. Now I understand why he trusts you, madam. Amelia's lost look at being called madam made Eltora smile inwardly. One of her questions was now answered. She's vulnerable to compliments like that. He needed to keep up these compliments, without making them obvious, so that she could intercede for him with Yandel in the future. Brace's law. At this moment, a sudden battle cry echoed, not from inside the vault, but from outside. It was loud enough to be heard clearly even through the heavy door. Bjorn. That scream was Bjorn's. The barbarian warrior identified who had let out the scream and began to scream in response, visibly moved. It was as if she had become the rescue signal. Eltora exchanged glances with Amelia, who asked sarcastically, "Didn't you say he would never come here?" He had no answer to her brief question. How was this possible? After the Marquis collapse, not even the first steps of the plan to form a trap using the Divine Spear as bait had been initiated. Brace's law. How the hell did he know to come here? The palace soldiers, who had remained stationed in the imperial capital even while Revision and Commelby were being destroyed, finally began to move. It wasn't for some grand reason, like they couldn't stand the injustice happening in the rest of the city, nor because a strategic moment had arrived to attack. It was because I asked them to move. Well, to be more precise, they were moved by the great authority of someone with the title of King's Knight, but I was the one who told him what to do. If it's just to get their attention. The amount of power Astaroth wielded was impressive. Even without setting up an audience, all he had to do was go to the commander and exchange a few words to change the orders of the Karnan army. The same army that stubbornly didn't budge even when District 4 was taken over by the Noarchians, claiming things like, "Our mission is to protect the imperial capital." Although the new mission wasn't something as serious as a full-scale counter-invasion, but more of a simulation of a counter-invasion, it made me curious. If the King's Knight had so much power, how absolute would the King's own authority be? The more I thought about it, the more depressed I became, so I decided to just focus on the present. While the palace soldiers distracted the enemies, I quietly infiltrated District 4 and arrived in front of the main gate of the Almanus Bank. Or rather, I stood there wondering what to do. Front door, back door, jump the fence. Which route should I take to safely rescue Einar? It didn't take me long to decide. Main door. There were two reasons for this. First, I would be discovered no matter which route I chose, due to my large body. Second, the main door was the closest to the underground vault. Brace's law. I used my barbarian authority against the two guards yawning at the main gate. Open black lens bracket, you cast swing. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket, the damage you deal with blunt weapons increases significantly in proportion to your muscular strength. Close black lens bracket. The barbarian authority was specialized in crushing, destroying and splitting things. It's Baron Yandel. Stop him. Why are you running after telling us to stop you? Run away. With my authority descending upon Almanus Bank, the Noarchians on guard didn't even think to confront me and fled like headless chickens. This wasn't strange to see. One would expect low-level enemies to act like this. Now, the real enemies should appear to stop me, since I caused such a big commotion. What? Why isn't anyone else coming? After passing through the main door and entering the building, I ran underground. However, fast was an exaggeration, considering how long I had spent running. Still, no real enemies appeared before me. Had the traps really not been set yet? I came here as quickly as possible, aiming for exactly this, but still. Why is it so easy? I couldn't believe it. It only made me think of the past, and my experience told me that I was in grave danger. The moment the taut rope gave way was when everything began to fall apart. Wait, I thought the worst. Could it be that the trap has already been completed? My enemy had foreseen everything. They made it seem like they were unprepared for me to come alone and even positioned weak soldiers so that I would let my guard down. I was even prepared for the worst-case scenario, where Einar would already be dead, and I would just be going to collect a corpse, but that didn't happen. Brace's law. After heading underground, destroying everything in my path, I heard Einar's battle cry. That was proof of his survival and my guide. Brace's law. When I shouted, Einar shouted back. It seemed like she was trying to indicate her location to me. Brace's law. In a way, I was moving like a bat using echolocation. Well, not exactly. Anyway, as we got closer, our screams continued to be in sync. Bjorn. Thanks to this, I was able to follow the most efficient path in this unknown underground vault to find Einar. For some reason, she wasn't trapped in the vault, but was alive and well outside. Amelia and Aoyan, and there were more faces I was happy to see, and even one that caused the opposite reaction. Eltora Tersarian. Haha, it's been a while, Baron Yandel. What was this guy doing here? It didn't take long for me to understand the situation. So, since you would die anyway if you stayed with the Marquis, you decided to cling to me. Like a bat. Well, more or less. I won't accept it if you try to give me some grand reason. You are right. Yes, he should have done that from the beginning. In any case, it was great that the Marquis' son was under my control. However, instead of thinking about how to use him, Emily, it's good to see you're safe. You too. I exchanged a brief greeting with Amelia, who I could finally see again, and then looked at Owen. It was a really strange feeling. Very good. You did something that neither I nor the palace could do. Please don't say that. I was just lucky. After all, you were the one who gave me that essence. I'm not talking about your essence or your luck. I'm talking about the fact that you made that decision. Even if they put 100 ordinary people in your position, none of them would have been able to make the same choice as you did at that moment. I was being sincere, but it seemed that Amelia found my words too harsh for Owen, as she butted into the conversation. Stop. Owen Rockrobe is a genuine member of the Anabata clan. Isn't it natural for him to be different from ordinary people? Oh, I thought she was going to tell me to stop embarrassing him, but she also wanted to praise him. Oh, I couldn't tell whether it was out of embarrassment or joy, but Owen lowered his head and fidgeted restlessly for a long time. Okay, time to leave the compliments here. Kisses. It's good to see you're okay. Praise me too. If it weren't for me, Rodmiller wouldn't have been able to take you there. Oh, by the way, what happened to Rodmiller? Didn't you bring him this time? Ah, she didn't know. Surviving the game as a barbarian. Chapter 759. Hostage 4 quarters. Rodmiller was dead. I was told that he pulled a wagon towards the imperial capital to save me, and that he jumped out to protect it. Astarota was even kind enough to inform me that the Noarchians took Rodmiller's head with them. However, she doesn't know yet. I immediately realized that Einar, Amelia, and Owen were unaware of Rodmiller's fate. This Eltora guy was another story. When I froze upon hearing Rodmiller's name, the others just stared at me in silence. What do I do? For a moment, I wondered whether I should tell Rodmiller what had happened or not. Einar could easily lose control in shock and cause some disastrous outcome. But I don't think it depends on whether she loses control or not. With that thought, I made a decision. Yeah, better tell me right away. Rodmiller is dead. I went straight to the point, like a barbarian. There was no point in telling how he jumped from the cart, was beheaded, and had his head taken as a trophy. The process didn't change the outcome. Rodmiller was dead. He died leaving a short will for me. It was the only thing I needed to remember. Einar shivered. It seemed like she hoped that Rodmiller had reached the imperial capital and was fine, but unfortunately, her story did not have a happy ending. I see. He's dead. However, contrary to what I feared, Einar reacted unexpectedly calmly upon hearing the news. Well, that wasn't all that unexpected. The two of them were certainly close while they were together in the sacred land. But then again, that was all. Einar quickly made friends with other barbarians and people in general. He formed strong bonds with them and had numerous close friends besides Rodmiller. May his soul be called to the place he longed to be, Einar said in a brief prayer. Death was not a foreign concept to her. Barbarians were a brutal race, immersed in a world of life or death as soon as they came of age. No, it's not just about the barbarians. Although this was a city cursed with countless inequalities, there was one thing that was the same for everyone. Everyone was equal under the shadow of death, which constantly loomed nearby. He was a very good human being, which is rare to see these days. What a shame. And so her mourning ended. Owen, who was not so close to Rodmiller, did not react much. Amelia, however, was unable to completely contain her feelings. Brown Rodmiller died, trying to save you, she murmured as if she couldn't believe it. Her eyes widened, and her shoulders shook, a rare sight. The reason was simple. Are you well? She looked at me like I was a man on the verge of an extreme breakdown, and I just shrugged it off as if it didn't affect me. I'm fine. Don't worry. Although she gave me an incredulous look, she didn't ask any more questions. And I wasn't lying. I really was fine, at least now. There were a lot of things I needed to focus on, and solving each one of them was my top priority. He wouldn't want me to stumble while looking back on the past, either. Although my fists clenched at the thought, I decided to face Rodmiller's death after everything was over. Only after informing those close to him, holding the funeral, and contemplating how to honor his heavy legacy would I truly feel what I had lost. After that, I would have some sleepless nights. As I always did. Don't try too hard, Yandel. I partially ignored Amelia's concerned words. While I appreciated the gesture, I needed to move on. I looked Eltora up and down as if I were examining merchandise in a display case. How could I use the Marquise's son to extract the most value from him? Eltora even started selling herself to me. Currently, the Noarchian army is divided into three: Noarch, Orkuls, and the Marquis faction. However, after my father's collapse, command of the march was temporarily passed to me. So what? Just give me the order. Before my father awakens, I have the power to do anything you wish, Eltora whispered to me like a demon speaking to a fallen hero. I declared my wish aloud, as if possessed. So, may I have a word with the Marquis? With my gavel. Ah, that's a little. I clicked my tongue. I knew the answer would be no. Still, with how confident he seemed, I had hope, but it was to be expected that he wouldn't be able to kill the Marquis so easily. When I gave Eltora a disapproving look for giving me that false hope, he became distressed. Still, there's no guarantee that there isn't a way. Either there is a way, or there isn't. What do you mean, there is no guarantee? Eltora began to explain the method to me, assuring herself by saying that she didn't know if it would work. I heard your plan without much expectation, but when I got to the end, I think it could work. Once I decided, I put the plan into practice. Boom, boom. I confidently climbed the stairs towards the surface, ran through the lobby and made my way to the main gate, only to find it completely destroyed. As I stood in front of him, the sunlight shone down on me, and I could see the street crowded with Noarchian soldiers. For some reason, this reminds me of the old days. At that time, I only had the essences of the corpse golem and the vampire. Boom. I announced my presence and felt the piercing gazes of the soldiers land on me. As a seasoned veteran, I didn't need to say anything fancy. I lifted Eltora into the air, wondering if this was how Moses felt when he parted the Red Sea. Young Lord Tersarion has been taken hostage. I managed to convey my intentions without saying a single word. Boom, boom. I continued down the street, maintaining open black lens bracket gigantification close black lens bracket, with Amelia and Aoyan riding on my shoulders. Oh, Einar followed me around like a mastiff. Technically, I could carry Einar too, but she declined the offer. Do I really need to? Walking is much more comfortable. Yes, typical of a fellow barbarian. Anyway, boom, boom. As I walked forward, Einar followed me, and behind her were hundreds of Noarchians, visibly confused and worried about what they should do. Shouldn't we do something? And who will take responsibility if that man's only son dies? So we're just going to keep going like this. A message has been sent to the superiors, so let's wait for an order. Some seemed inclined to act, but their words were drowned out by those awaiting orders from their commanders. I can also see some members of the Orkuls. I will tell you their appearances, characteristics and the essences they possess, so memorize everything. From what I heard from Amelia, it seemed that this group of soldiers was not only composed of the Marquis faction, but they also did not act rashly. Their situation was not much different. If they acted recklessly and the Alliance leader's son died, it would become a huge political problem. Boom, boom. And so this strange procession continued. At first glance, it looked like one of those Olympic torch relay races. Although instead of a torch, I was holding Eltora in the air by the neck, and hundreds of people were following. Plus, the Olympic torch symbolizes peace, yet another similarity too. Eltora. Please, a little more gentle. Apparently, the symbol of peace itself was having a hard time with the impact on its neck with every step I took. Of course, peace always requires the sacrifice of a martyr. Boom, boom. With that thought, I quickened my pace. It would take hours to reach my destination if I continued walking. He's going after the Marquis. Baron Yandel has captured young Lord Tersarion and is going after the Marquis. The soldiers seemed to be starting to pick up on my intentions, but they still didn't try to stop me. Although I expected this, I was a little surprised. This is really working. The person who proposed this idea was the current symbol of peace, Eltora. There was an organizational flaw in the Noarch Alliance. 3 command points, and the commanders weren't exactly loyal to each other. Plus, it was human nature to prioritize one's own safety above all else. This nature was even stronger among the Noarchians. Given all this, I figured there was a good chance no one would try to stop me, even if I just charged in, and that prediction came true. Baron Yandel is going after the Marquis. This fool dares. Please give us the order. The Marquis is the one who has the authority to do so, but he is unconscious. Still, there should be a temporary commander in his place. That hostage there is the temporary commander. Well, if you want to act on your own, I won't stop you, but you'll have to take responsibility for the consequences. Most of the conversations followed this pattern, leading to this absurd situation. Oh, of course, the army's large-scale invasion of the imperial capital probably contributed to this confusion and indecision. Also, after advancing at a fast pace, I began to see my destination in the distance, only to find a few people blocking my path. Normally, I would have simply broken through, no matter who tried to stop me. But unfortunately, I couldn't do that this time, not with these particular figures. The Demon Eye, Roland Bonozant, vice leader of Orkuls, was personally leading this group. And he wasn't alone. There were a few dozen true Orkuls members behind him. The Demon Eye didn't shout anything unnecessary, it just blocked my path, and I silently stopped. Then, I raised the peace symbol higher so that everyone could see it better. After all, this symbol of peace had the benefit of being able to speak for itself. What are you doing? Get out of the way. The human symbol called for peace, as promised, but unfortunately, the target this time was not convinced. Why should we? The person who answered in the vice captain's place was a man who seemed to prefer books and was clearly talented in public speaking. Why you want to cause an internal fight? Currently, I hold the authority of the Marquis faction. With just a word from me, you will have to fight against all the soldiers who are behind me. Well, I wonder if that's the case. Also, the Noarchian alliance has come to a decision. While Eltora Tersarion certainly has the right to temporarily hold the authority of the Marquis faction, he has lost that right when he was captured by the enemy as a hostage. According to the laws of the alliance, Gulp, Eltora Tersarion's authority will be withdrawn from this moment on, and all forces under his command will be transferred to the alliance until the Marquis regains consciousness, said the man with the glasses with an air of authority. Then, he asked Eltora, "This is a personal question, but, are you doing all this because you were truly captured by them or because you decided to ally yourself with these people?" No. Response. Oh. No need to answer. I already have my answer. These words seemed to shake the peace symbol, but I wasn't surprised. I simply dropped the symbol that had outlived its usefulness and took out a different peace symbol. In the end, peace was obtained by the strong. Surviving the game as a barbarian. Chapter 760. Secret Garden 1/6. Demon Eye, Roland Bonozant. In Orkuls, where strength was the supreme law, he rose to the position of vice leader, killing his predecessor with a single blow. He was one of the most powerful ability users within the organization. His long and infamous career included many feats that were the subject of rumor and legend, but the most recent stood out in my mind, defeating the Divine Spear, Einar Fenelon. Though it was strange to admit, Einar had been one of my most promising allies, alongside Erwin. Even back when she was known as the Savage Sword, she was already part of the Mighty Seven. Einar was, without a shadow of a doubt, powerful. And yet, Roland Bonozant defeated her without suffering too many injuries. More importantly, he managed to capture her alive. Accomplishing just one of these feats would already be an indisputable indication of the difference in power between them, but he achieved both simultaneously. There was no denying it. He was strong. Incredibly, absurdly strong. Perhaps most would have expected this from the vice leader of Orkuls, but I found myself caught off guard. After all, my last memory was still fresh in my mind. This was the same guy who had nearly died from a daze after I had smashed his head in with a hammer. Sure, it had been a sneak attack on my part, but still. It was hard to accept that someone like that had surpassed Einar, of all people. Yandel, be careful, he uses some strange abilities, Einar warned. I couldn't help but laugh. So even she can be intimidated, I thought to myself. On the other hand, she probably didn't know what essences Bonozant possessed and the abilities they granted her. Of course, they would seem very strange to her. Let's say I deal with the demon eye alone. Can Amelia and Einar handle the rest on their own? And still protect two people at the same time? I reflected, it was a difficult task. As my doubts began to deepen, Glasses, the same one who had shaken the resolve of our symbol of peace, stepped forward and cleared his throat. Although, ahead, would be an exaggeration. Listen carefully, Baron Yandel. Is he targeting me this time? You are already surrounded. If you are counting on reinforcements from the Imperial Army, I suggest you abandon that false hope. The capital's forces are retreating as we speak. I stared at him, waiting for him to get to the point. So what? The future is already decided, so I'm going to make an offer. Drop your weapon and surrender. I cannot reveal the details at this time, but the Castellan wants to see you. So he was trying to convince me. I turned to Amelia, silently asking who this guy was. He's someone close to the Castellan, she explained. He doesn't have a fixed role, but he's called upon whenever they need to solve a problem. It was a vague description, but I understood the implication. Amelia had played this exact role in the past. Simply put, Glasses was playing the same role Amelia had once played. I wondered why I had never met this guy if he was so important. Still, it was funny. The ones who stood in my way were the central unit of Orkuls, but the one who tried to win me over was the Castellan. So, what do you say? We can't wait forever, so decide here and now. Glasses seemed convinced that I wouldn't reject his offer, but his suggestion sparked just one thought in me. There seems to be no camaraderie in their group. My answer was already decided from the beginning. I refuse. He was surprised. Do you have any problems with your ears? I said I refuse. The Marquis was almost within my reach. My mission would be over the moment I killed him. That was the only mission I had received from the king, after all. Once I killed the Marquis, my allies and I would escape the palace's wrath. And yet he expected me to surrender. Does he have a problem with his head? Even if the Marquis had not been my target, my answer would not have changed. The only reason a barbarian would kneel was to propel himself into a leap. And my instincts told me that this offer from him would never allow me to rise again. Demon Eye clicked his tongue as he looked at Glasses, who seemed confused by my answer. I told you, an offer like that won't work on him. It seemed like he already knew that an offer like that wouldn't work on me. I suppose that was to be expected from someone who had survived having his head crushed by my hammer. We're just wasting precious time. Demon Eye didn't hide his disdain as he walked forward, passing by Glasses. The latter seemed to understand his intentions and retreated in disappointment. As long as we refuse to reconcile and meet each other halfway, there's no point in continuing to talk. Reconcile. Don't use difficult words. I tilted my head in mock ignorance, watching as the color of Demon Eye's pupils changed. The tension of an impending battle settled in the air around us. My grip on the gun, now a symbol of peace, tightened. Then, suddenly, a sharp whistle cut through the tension. Once again, I was reminded of how unpredictable this world could be. "Hey, Mr. Vice Leader." Demon Eye was the first to look away, directing his attention to the source of the hissing, and I did the same to see who it was. And then, I saw him. Platinum blonde hair, slicked back with oil. Skin so pale it looked like it had never seen the light of day, combined with a cold and imposing facial structure. All of this topped off with a vile smile that didn't match the rest of it at all. I came on the scene. The walking, talking human variable, Becco Lee. Becco made his grand entrance atop a 3-story inn, and he wasn't alone. There he sat, his legs dangling over the edge of the roof, flanked by familiar faces. Lekars, Jaina the priestess of Karui, the fallen grandpa, and... who were those guys? Dozens of hooded figures that I didn't recognize were there, emanating a completely abnormal aura, from head to toe. Since when did Becco have an army like that? It was undoubtedly a spectacular display of strength, but Demon Eye paid no attention to the people behind Becco, keeping his gaze fixed on him. "What do you want here?" The question awakened a strange sense of kinship in me. So the vice leader knew as well as I did how unpredictable this kid could be. "Oh, I'm just here to watch," the focus of our attention replied, with a mocking tone. Demon Eye did not respond. Instead, he simply stared at Becco, as if trying to discern whether he was telling the truth. For my part, I didn't even know where to look. I'm screwed. I felt more trapped than ever. My last interaction with Becco had been an absolute disaster. It had been nice to explore the world beyond the city walls, but things had gone wrong in the final stretch, and I had ended up being attacked by his allies. My own allies had had to search for me beyond the walls, only to witness the aftermath of the battle. In the end, I managed to make him kneel first. "I apologize for threatening you, Baron 1. I couldn't even imagine the humiliation he must have felt. He probably held an intense grudge against me. Thus, Becco could safely be placed in the category of a negative variable to be subtracted from my circumstances." Lie. Demon Eye's voice brought me back to the present, and Becco broke into a smile, shouting, "Correct. Tell me, why are you here? Standing around and watching you two fight seemed like it would be pretty boring." Nonsense. Naturally, the vice leader didn't understand the slang, and instead of explaining, Becco simply went straight to his main point. "But aren't the numbers too unbalanced for a fair fight? What are you trying to say? You two should settle this mano a mano." His method followed no discernible logical line between cause and effect. As primitive as it was, the intent of his words was clear. "And we will join Baron Yandel's side if you refuse. Are you saying you're going to break the deal?" "Yep." The cheerful reply left the vice leader speechless, and Becco seized the opportunity. "What is this? Vice leader, were you naive enough to actually trust a useless piece of paper?" The childish insults hit home, making the Demon Eye grit his teeth. "That's why I said we shouldn't trust a stray dog that bites every hand it sees." "Wow, how rude. I know exactly who to bite." Demon Eye quickly regained his composure despite Becco's continuous provocations. "So, what exactly does mano a mano mean?" "Oh, I think I should explain this first. Simply put, A1C, no, not like that." "So," Becco thought for a moment, then lowered his voice, as if to indicate that the joke was over. "Just duel each other. In other words, an ultimatum." Demon Eye calmly confirmed something. "And the reason? Fighting is no fun if one side has the numerical advantage, right?" The conversation paused for a moment. Demon Eye was silent, seemingly weighing the pros and cons of the proposal, and I found myself in the same situation, my head throbbing as I tried to think. Was Becco Lee a positive or negative variable? The answer didn't come easily. Both Demon Eye and I knew that Becco's story about being bored was just a lie. He undoubtedly had some ulterior motive. Still, the numbers were making sense. That might just tip the odds in my favor for now. If Becco had intervened with the intention of suffocating me, I would have had no way of fighting back. The fact that he hadn't taken an openly hostile stance toward me was a positive point, even if the final outcome was still uncertain. Right, now that I think about it, I didn't ask Baron Yandel's opinion.